Well, listen, welcome everybody. This is fun. Welcome to the Interscholastic Sailing Association's High School Sailing Coaches Masterclass. I'm Dave Perry. I know many of you, and I'm looking forward to get to know more of you. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Steve Hunt, and we're happy to spend the next hour with you right now, the high school sailing coaches in MASSA, the Mid-Atlantic Sailing Association, and to get into things. You know, Steve and I aren't quite the same age. So we've always known of each other. I've admired his sailing career and his coaching career from afar, but we've never had a chance to sit down as colleagues and have a beer together and get to know each other and pick each other's brains. You know, what do we do and why do we do it and what are some of the reasons for it? So I'm really happy that we have this chance in this format to, while the AP flag is up, to sit down and get to know each other. And we're going to have a nice conversation. We're going to ask each other questions and pick each other's brains and do some deep dives. And we invite all of you to join us. You know, you can have your favorite beverage and join along. Before we get going, I want to thank Tim Hogan. Tim, as you know, is the president of the Interscholastic Sailing Association. Tim, thanks for agreeing to support this and help us organize it. Tim's been the president of the ISSA for some 15 years and involved for longer. And what I've come to really know personally, which I've known from afar, is that Tim is fundamentally committed to helping making high school sailing both a great experience and a formative experience for the high school sailors around the country. So, Tim, thanks a lot. And anything you'd like to say to the coaches?
Well, I'd just like to welcome everybody. And it's important for us, ISSA, the board, and everybody involved is, okay, how do we get better? And Dave and I were talking a few weeks ago and said, you know, the best way to get better is let's go put together a coaches clinic. So here we are. And I'm very excited about it. We have 4 different sessions and it's going to be fun. So welcome. But I want to add one thing on age. Dave, a number of years ago, I'm a lot older than most of you guys, but we were at a high school where we got in Chicago, and I did my speech at the beginning, and I said, oh, by the way, I sailed the Sears Cup here in 1966. And the kids all looked at me and just went, who is this guy? So I learned my lesson on that.
There you go.
Okay, well, have fun and ask questions and turn it over to the pros.
All right, well, Tim, thanks a lot. Before we go forward, I want to thank Geraldine Beal. Geraldine, would you put your hand up? Nice big yellow sweater there. She's a partner at One Design Management, but she works with the ISSA and helps coordinate their opportunities and their programs. And she's been the nuts and bolts person for putting together this series. We've got 7 districts, and we're doing this 4 different weeks. So, Geraldine, thanks for all you've done. You've had help from Jared Woglumuth from the San Diego Yacht Club. He's the regatta administrator there, an IT person. So without you all, this wouldn't happen. So to Geraldine and Jared, thank you so much. We also thank the friends of ISSA who have opened up their wallets and helped support this, and so that you all can be here for free. So we thank them, and they know who they are, and I appreciate that. And we also thank U.S. Sailing and the U.S. Sailing Foundation. They're a huge contributor to this. And so we thank them both for their grant and also for all their work and leadership in the area of education for coaches and sailing instructors around the country. That's something that they do very well, and you're going to hear more about that. So listen, you might be a veteran high school coach. You might be the chemistry teacher who made the mistake of saying at the opening cocktail party that you sailed in camp once and suddenly the principal made you the coach of the high school sailing team. You know, it doesn't really matter. You might be a very experienced coach, or you might be new to the business, in which case, welcome to the abyss. But tonight we're here to help all coaches get better and become the best high school sailing coach they can be, and to help you along your journey on this great highway. Throughout our conversation, Steve and I are going to be, as I say, picking each other's brains, and we welcome you to do the same. So one way you can ask questions is put it in the chat room. The chat room is open all night. And one of the beautiful things about Zoom is that it's okay to talk behind the teacher's back. It's okay to pass notes. So please open the chat room. If you have questions for Steve and I, put them in there. We'll be watching that, and we'll call on you, and you can come out and say it. Also, about 3/4 of the way in, we're going to take a pause and invite questions from you all. In which case you can just come off mute and say, hey, Dave, this is Sarah. I got a question. And I'll say, hey, Sarah, so you know I hear you. And what's your question? And then just stay off mute until we're finished with it. Or you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand on the screen, or you can go to your participants box, and there's a button that says raise hand. And you can just hit that, and your little hand will pop up, and I'll see that, and I'll call on you. Again, stay off mute, and we'll answer your question, and then you can put your hand back down by hitting the same button. I also realize there's a wide range of experience in this group, including some very experienced high school sailing coaches. So please, I ask you all to keep an eye on the chat room, and you answer the questions in there also. We're not the only experts in the room. So if you see a question, you can answer it, and you can share your experiences and your insights. You can even put links in there to things. So there's multi-layers of coaching help going on. And please use the chat room. At the end of the session, I record the chat room, and I'll send the transcript out in the pre-read. So all the good stuff that's being talked about in the chat room will not be lost. The only thing we don't have time for, unfortunately, is for people to come on and start telling their stories and their comments and sharing their experiences. We just don't have that bandwidth. But I encourage all the districts to have somebody organize a coaches roundtable within the district, where you all can get together on the Zoom room and you can share your experiences and stories, especially the ones that are particular to your district. Every district has its own unique situation. So I encourage you to do that. You know, how cool it'll be if after every one of these sessions, sometime between this one and the next one, you get together and talk about what you learned here and some other ideas, and it builds on each other. So that's what we're after. We want everyone to get better, and we also want to make sure we get it all fit in with this hour. So sit back, enjoy the ride, enjoy the conversation, pour yourself a margarita or two, and enjoy the show. Steve and I get to know each other. And Steve, I'm curious, where did you even grow up, and how did you even get into sailing?
I actually grew up in Virginia, a small city called Poquoson, and I started taking sailing at Hampton Yacht Club. My dad was a big racer and a waterman, and so my whole family grew up on the water and enjoying surfing and sailing and fishing, and I really fell in love with it. I started taking it when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Been doing it ever since. So how about you?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I was born in a little town called Southport, Connecticut. It's a village in Fairfield, Connecticut, in right about an hour from New York City, right on Long Island Sound. It's an old fishing village, and sailing's in the culture. And my dad was a huge sailboat racer. He used to race a boat called an Atlantic back in the 60s. And there was ferocious one design racing, and I'd come down, I'd see them all, you know, washing their sails and arguing about stuff. And I just said, that's really cool. And then the Pequot Yacht Club, which is the club in Southport, was very welcoming to kids. So I grew up in a culture, and I was very lucky. And then how about you? When did you start to realize you were a teacher? When did you realize you had the teaching bug?
After going through the ranks of the junior program, I became a junior instructor, and I really fell in love with it. And I think my mom was a principal and a teacher, and my dad used to be a sailing coach, so it might have been in the blood, but I learned I really enjoyed helping people become better sailors, and made a lot of mistakes along the way, but here I am, I don't know, 30 some years later, still doing it. So it's great. And I know you've been doing it for a while too. So how about you? When did you start coaching?
I knew I had the bug to be a little showman. When I was about 8 years old, my dad got me a thing called the planetarium. It was just a ball with a bunch of vinyl, and they poked holes in it to make the 3 stars in Orion's belt, the Big Dipper and Leo, and there's a little light bulb in there, and I'd go in my room and turn the lights off and turn it on, and there on the ceiling was all the constellations, and I love that. Next thing I know, my dad's got me in front of a bunch of kindergartners doing a planetarium show, and I loved it, and I loved the feeling. I got a little older, and my godfather's kid was a magician, and he outgrew his tricks. I got 2 suitcases full of tricks, and by the age of 12, my sister and I were putting on magic shows for the 2nd graders, and I've always loved to show. Like, even now when I'm doing a clinic, to me, it's a little bit of a planetarium show. A little beginning, a little end, a few surprises. And so, but my real love of teaching revealed itself when I was a junior instructor, same as you, about 15 years old, junior sailing program. They asked the older kids to help the younger kids. And I remember helping the kids sail out the harbor. It's a tough sail out of Pequot. And, he was struggling, and then they got all the way out there and they made it. And he was really excited. And I felt so proud and so happy, and I felt even better than when I would win a race. So that's when I knew I really had the teaching bug. But hey, Steve, fast forward to now. You've been the coach at Point Loma High for the last 10 years. You've won 5 Mallory Cups, 5 Bakers, a Cressy. It's got to make you the most successful high school sailing coach ever. So why do you think you've been so effective at passing along? What are some of your guiding beliefs or your guiding principles when you teach?
Well, I think a lot of it's I've been lucky to have some great sailors join the program, which make me look good. I just sit back and hand them water, but
the athletes make the coach look good. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think a big part is passion. I race. Oh, hold on, let me hit mute here. Yeah. I race sailboats for a living, and I love it. And I'm really passionate about sailboat racing and sharing my thoughts on sailboat racing. And I think it's really important to teach with passion. And we've all had teachers that are passionate, and you get excited as a student. And we've had the teachers that are boring, and they put the notes up on the board and make you copy it, and they don't talk, and you could care less. So I think passion is huge. So if you're not in the best mood on the way down to the yacht club to meet the kids after school, you got to get pumped up and be excited, have a twinkle in your eye. And I think another big part is storytelling. If I teach a lesson, the lesson might be short and sweet, and then I try to tell a story about it.
Nice.
And it makes me feel great when a kid comes up to me and says, "Hey, coach, I rolled that other guy on the top reach just like you did to the Ukrainian in Sydney that time." And I think, oh, cool. I have that more than any other lesson, feedback wise, and it tells me they love the stories. And then I think the last one is, I think is very important. Is probably the underlying theme is constant improvement. And we don't necessarily focus so much on results. I keep preaching, hey, we got to get better. We got to get better. And I think the longer the season is, the more we'll get better. And it's not necessarily about winning. It's about getting better and improving. And I tell the team that practice is like studying for an exam. And the regatta is an exam. And the regatta just shows us like how well we're studying. And if you don't do well, it's my fault.
Yeah.
And I think that reduces the pressure. But I say, if you don't do well, the regatta, it's your coach's fault. I'm focusing on the wrong things. Let's let the regatta or the exam tell us what we need to focus on.
Nice. Yeah, really, really good stuff. So,
I read your resume and I've heard a lot about you, and I've actually been coached by you, and I loved it. And I know you coached John Shadden and Charlie McKee, Ron Rosenberg to gold and bronze medals at the Youth Worlds, in the 80s, I think it was. And as recently as last year, you coached the Youth Match Race Worlds, and it was a Jack Parkin. And in New Zealand, he won a silver medal. And I know that you get hired by America's Cup teams to coach and Olympians to coach. And so what's your secret sauce? Like, have you been so successful and keep getting hired by these high-level programs?
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I was a coach for John Shadden and Ron Rosenberg in double-handed, and Steve and Charlie McKee in the single-handed. We went to the Youth Worlds in 1981. Were you even born then, Steve? How old were you?
Yeah, I was 6 years old.
6 years old. So there you go. And yeah, Jack Parkin, they won the silver medal at the Youth Worlds, Match Racing Worlds, with his great team from Stanford and Tufts. That was actually this February of this year. It's sort of the last thing I did before we all started hunkering down. So I have been doing it a long time, and I've had some success, and I appreciate you asking. And there's a few things that come to mind. One is you have to have a strong knowledge base of what you're teaching. You can't teach something you don't know. So I'm a real student of the game, and if there's something I don't know and I'm about to teach it, I go out and find it. I don't try to BS the kids ever. And then if I don't know something, I bring an expert in. I was asked to do a clinic for the Flying Dutchman team back in 1979. I was doing the soling. I didn't know anything about Flying Dutchman. But I could facilitate, I could organize a practice, I could run drills, I could give comparative feedback, so I could be useful. But I couldn't teach them about tacking. And I saw Everett Bastet, one of the best Canadian FD sailors at the time, and he was over there putting his boat away. So I said, Everett, come over here. So he came over and said, Everett, they have a question about tacking. How do you do it? And he showed him. So I'm not afraid to bring in other people to supplement what I know, but I really try to make sure I really know my subject deeply. And then I'm a student of the process. I study teaching. Now, when I was at Yale, I used to watch how the professors taught much more than I listened to what they were talking about. Vince Scully, the history of art, it was fantastic. I didn't listen to a thing, I didn't learn much there. My grades reflected that, but I learned a lot about teaching. And I'm always watching teachers, the good ones, the not good ones. I'm always refining my skill. I love the process. A third one is enthusiasm. You mentioned that. Don't have to say it again. Enthusiasm is a huge, it's sort of the oil that makes the engine go. A big one for me is I try never to tell people what to do. I was the athletic director at Greens Farms Academy in Westport for 21 years and hired a soccer coach, a young guy named Mickey Kites. And he was a great player in college and he's a pro player. And then when he's a little older, he started a soccer camp, youth soccer camp. And he used to say, Dave, the biggest mistake coaches make is they tell the kids what to do. He put on his shirt for all the kids, think, act, be creative. Think, act, be creative. I've never forgotten that. Sailing is the most complicated sport. And so you can't predict what to do. So he would teach them what to do by having them do it. A kid's trying to learn how to start. I watch him start. And I watch him let a boat come underneath them and take his hole away and then get shot out the back. I come up and say, so, hey, that didn't work out so well. And they go, yeah, we let the guy come in there. I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And they look at me like they're waiting for me to tell them. And I don't tell them. I said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, maybe I have to work with my crew a little better to get some more early information so that I know they're coming and I can defend. I go, that's a good idea. And maybe I need to be more aggressive in defending so that you can't get in there. That's a good idea. And they're all things I would have said, but I let them say it. I'm the guardrails to make sure I'm hearing it. And I got one more thing I'm going to say. So as we go away, I say, hey, those are all good things. And here's one more thing you can think about. And that's my style. So I try never to tell what to do. I think a real secret to my success, Steve, is I try to build trust with the people I work with too. The kids, I want them to trust me.
Well, how do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. I'd say the biggest, when I was younger, maybe you experienced this too, I always wished there was a button that I could push so my parents could feel how I was feeling. I was mad, I was angry, I was feeling sorry for myself. Nobody knows how I feel. Well, it turns out there is that button, and that button is called listening. I like to listen to the kids. I like to hear what they're saying. I ask them questions and let them talk. I try to keep the spotlight on them, and they love that, and I can learn so much about it. There was a great book. Philip needs to go on mute. Or Steve, you got that? So the book is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. It's by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. And it's wonderful. And once I realized that they have so much to say, it was great. I listened, and then I'm validating them. Hey, if I'm listening to them, they must be okay. And their thoughts must be okay. And I'm listening. And maybe I'm the guardrails to make sure we're in the right lane. But I felt that was a big secret. And then the final thing is I'm a firm believer, Steve, in positive motivation. I'm the carrot, not the stick. I heard a great thing once in a clinic. The coach said, hey, catch them doing something right. When I listen to a lot of coaches and parents, they're always pointing out what they're doing wrong. Hey, you got to heel more. Hey, don't turn so much. Hey, you're coming out too deep. Hey, all the things you're doing wrong. And all they're hearing is, I'm no good. I'm no good. So I try to catch them doing something right and say the things they're doing well, and that makes them want to repeat it. That's really important to me, the power of sort of positive motivation. So those are some of the things.
I think that's huge. I think if you can instill confidence in the kids, they do much better. And if they respect you and you're giving them shout outs for pointing out things they do well, I do the exact same thing. And like surfers, they give the old you when someone has a good wave. Yeah. I do that. If like someone crushes the start or wins the pin or wins the boat, I'll do that on the video and show the whole team, and it makes them feel good. Well,
and here's what kids hate. They hate to be talked at. They hate to be talked like they're a dog or they're stupid. They hate to be, okay, sit down, listen to me. That doesn't work. But I got a question for you, Steve. We happen to land in the most complicated, most complex sport. There can't be a sport more complex than sailboat racing. The rules are complex, the equipment's complex, the skills are complex, the game is complex. Oh my gosh, we should be just coaching something easy. But we're not. And what's some of your methods for taking something really complicated that you understand and can do, and how do you get that into the head of a teenage person who doesn't understand it yet? How do you get them to understand it and get them to do it? What are some of your methods for doing that?
I've thought about it a lot, and I've tried a lot of different things. And I think the best is to keep it super simple. And as a sailor, you have to think, like, what is the low-hanging fruit that gives you the most bang for your buck? For example, sailing the boat flat. And so I'll say, all right, team, we're really going to work on this year sailing our boat flat. And there's 3 ways to do it. You can ease your sails. I ask them too, how do you do it? But I have the 3 reasons. You ease your sails, you can scoot out with your weight, hike, and you can head up. So there's 3 ways. Let's go work on it. And we work on it all the time. And we video it and we talk about it. And that just one thing is a huge component of boat speed. And then, for example, with tactics, I hear some coaches say, oh, they make it complicated like it really can be. But they'll say the first third of the beat, you do this. The second third, you do this. The top of the beat, you do this. And I heard that from a great sailor, an Olympian, Georgetown College Sailor of the Year. But to me, I thought, oh, that's really complicated. I'm not that smart. So what can I teach the high school kids? And I figured out you just teach them sail in more wind and sail towards the mark.
Huh.
And that's it. What makes sailboats move? Wind. So if you have more wind than someone else, you go faster. So rule number 1, put your boat in the most wind on the race course. You have to look for it and find it. Rule number 2, once you're in it, you sail towards the mark.
Huh.
And I even remind them that when I'm pushing them off the dock. It's just super simple, keep it basic. So those 3 things: sail your boat flat, sail in more wind, sail towards the mark. If you're actually accomplishing those things, you never do poorly. So it's keep it simple. And then another one is video. I like to show video of complex tasks. I'll never forget, I read The Inner Game of Tennis, and it changed my coaching. The guy said, I'll never forget the example. He said, if you're teaching someone how to serve, it's a complicated maneuver. There's 12 steps, and you teach them all these different things, and then you hand them the racket and the ball, and they're horrible because they're trying to think about all these things in like a second or two. The same thing with teaching a roll tack, 7 steps or whatever. And so he said, what he said was you say, hey, watch me serve. Just sit back and relax. Just watch the whole thing. And he would do 50 serves. And then he would hand them the racket and the ball and not say a word. So give it a shot. And they would be 100 times better than the other method.
Yeah.
And I realized I did that in sailing. I did here's the 12 steps to a roll tack. So then I learned I just show a video of a great roll tack.
Yeah.
So today, team, we're going to work on roll tacks. Here's a sweet one. And then we go sailing. And we practice tacking on the whistle. I video, we come in. I show the great roll tack again, or the best one of the day. I show some other ones that might not be so hot.
Nice.
I say, what do you guys think? And I think that's huge. And so you actually don't need to coach as much as you think. Coach less and it's better. And the kids get it.
Yeah, I love it. The fact that you mentioned Inner Game of Tennis, I just had some goose pimples because that single book, I read it when I was in college. It changed the way I competed, and it changed the way I taught. Just like you're saying, it's sort of cool that it's resonating with both of us. And it was Timothy Galloway who wrote that. He comes from it came from the Zen ways of belief, and really cool that you mentioned that.
Right. It's like, I think your subconscious is way better at understanding complex things. So if you just see it, it comprehends it all. But if you have to think about each step, you're in trouble. And then there's one more thing that I shouldn't forget is that I come up with funny sayings. Because they're kids and they think I'm a dork, but I say, all right, guys, repeat after me. And they're like, okay, what's the coach going to say? I say, I make my mama proud. I never start in a crowd.
Wait, say it again. Say that one again.
Yeah, I make my mama proud. I never start in a crowd. And they all laugh and they're like, what the heck? Then at a regatta, if they have a horrible start at the pin, it's crowded. I say, hey, did you make your mama proud on that start? And they'll be like, no. And then another one is, I win with ease because I sail in more breeze.
I win with ease because I sail in more breeze. So good.
And there's another one that's rule number 2 of tactics, and they laugh. I say, I'm not a hack. I sail the long tack.
Those are good.
And the cool thing is, in some of our debriefs, the kid will raise his hand and be like, hey, coach, I thought of another one. And he'll just come up with a rhyme and people laugh. And
there it is.
It gets everybody involved.
Really fun. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So I took a match racing class one time with you, and I loved it. And just like you, I wrote down I had a different page for coaching and I had pages for the match racing, and I was writing down like 2 different topics, how well you coached. And I noticed in that clinic, I was with a bunch of kids. And I was
Wait,
like
was
the
that a
only
San
adult.
Diego Yacht Club, Steve?
Yeah, I was at San Diego Yacht
I
Club.
remember you were in the crowd there. I almost didn't recognize, you blended right in so well with the high school kids.
Yeah, exactly. That's why my wife says I coach high school, is because I'm as mature as a high school kid. But
No,
we all get
I was
along
seeing the
well.
looks. I was seeing the looks.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, at the beginning of the clinic, there's all these kids that had never sailed keel boats or match raced.
Yeah.
And by the end of the clinic, all these kids were match racing keel boats really well. And I thought, wow, we've only been here for a few days, and Dave did an amazing job. So I'm curious if you could explain to me, like, how do you do that? How do you make a kid that's never done it really good in 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, man. It's first of all, it's a huge challenge, and I love challenges. Taking in a bunch of kids who never sailed keelboats very much, and then have never match raced, and yeah, I get 2 days and 2.5 days with them. I love the challenge. I love thinking about it. And the first thing I think about, Steve, is what are going to be the barriers? What are going to be the things that are going to prevent them from learning? And how do I help remove those barriers? So you can't remove them unless you know what they are. And it turns out I always identify 3 main barriers, and they're all fears. One is the fear of letting somebody down. You're in the match race clinic, and it's time to put the spinnaker up, and you're on the foredeck, and you're just so afraid you're going to make a mistake up there, and everyone's going to be mad at you. You're going to let people down. The other is fear of humiliation. I mean, kids have it, adults have it. No one wants to seem like they don't know what they're doing and be made, do something wrong or say something stupid. So they're afraid of that humiliation feeling. And then the final one is the fear of either injury, fear of getting hurt, which is legitimate in a keelboat, or more importantly, the fear of damage. They're afraid they're going to plow their J22 into a beautiful FARD 30 on the dock. So those are their fears. And I want to make sure I maneuver myself so they don't ever come up against those fears. So I try to create a pathway that has opportunities for success. That's my whole style, is right from the beginning. I want to make sure everything they do, they're having success. They're able to do it and they're feeling success. I listen to them right away. They're telling us stories. How you doing? And what about this? And I listen to what they're saying. And maybe a kid's had some experience in the keelboat putting a spinnaker up. So now we're on the dock and it's time to, talk about that. And I'll ask that kid, hey, what do you do to put the spinnaker up? And I know they know the answer. And then they give the answer as if I don't know they know the answer. And they feel good about it, and everybody is impressed. So I always look for ways to make kids, look good. The next thing is getting comfortable in the boats. So the first thing we do is we go down to the boats, and I sit them on the dock, and we have a little dock talk. And I sit in the boat, and I show them how to hold the hiking stick in a keelboat, how to banjo the backstay to get it on when it's windy. J22s, as you remember, it's cross sheeting. And there's a winch, a lot of stuff. So I show them how to wrap the winch, and we do that. Then they all get on their boats, and they practice it. And I say, show me how to wrap the winch, and they do it the wrong way, and I just pause, and then they do it the right way, and show me how to banjo. And I make sure they can do all the stuff before we even go on the water, so that they're comfortable. Then I love what I do next. When they're on their way out, I say, listen, every few minutes, just change roles in the boat. So every few minutes, if you're driving, you do the main sheet. If you're doing the main sheet, you do the jib. If you're doing the jib, you do the bow. Bow comes back and drives. I don't want to drive. Don't worry about it. Just drive. You're not going to hit anybody. You're just sailing out there. And by 15 or 20 minutes out there, Steve, they've all been everywhere in the boat, and they're really comfortable in the boat, and they're not afraid of something else. So
That's great.
Yeah, nice, solid. And then I just set a windward mark and a leeward mark. I have them sail around the track. No racing, no pressure. Stay away from each other. And they practice tacking, they practice jibing, they round the mark, and they're butchering it, and they don't know what they're doing. And I watch, and they're tacking, and the jib's totally backed, and I watch again, and it's not so backed the next time, and I watch again, and it's pretty good the next time because the kids aren't stupid. And then there's one team that's flailing. I pull up alongside and say, hey, I noticed that every time you go to jibe, the batten doesn't invert or whatever it is. Here's an idea. Try to flick it when you're finished. Okay, thanks. And then I watch them, they do it. So I watch them do their thing, and so now they're comfortable in the boats. And now it's time to come on shore and teach them about match racing. And I'm totally guided by a Chinese proverb. I read it somewhere, and I don't even know if it's really a Chinese proverb, but it said Chinese proverb. But here's how it goes. It completely guides all my teaching. It goes like this. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. I hear and I forget. Mark Twain said, no sinners are ever saved after the first 20 minutes of the sermon. I try to cut that down to about 5 minutes. Even after 5 minutes of talking, people have no idea what you're saying. So I try to make the talking really short. So I'll say, okay, we're going to talk about the match racing pre-start. There's 3 phases in the pre-start. The first phase we call the entry and the first meeting. And in there we do a dial-up. Now I've teed up the lane. Now we're going to talk about. Then I show a video of a dial-up. This is what it looks like. It's a really good video, just like you were saying. They can watch it. They can see it. Now they know what it looks like. I don't have to say a thing. Maybe I do that for a bunch of skills. And then maybe later on that afternoon or tomorrow morning, now we go on the lawn. So they've heard it. They've seen it. They remember it. Now we go on the lawn and I give them polls and we walk through it. And maybe next week we can talk about how to do land drills. But I make sure they can do everything on land that I'm going to have them do on the water. I do and I understand. And it's powerful.
So how do you do if the do is the most important part, how do you make that happen on the water?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, a soccer coach has it easy. They just can pluck little plastic things down and make grids. Sailing's trickier. So first of all, I try to have them do the skills with no pressure. So dialing up, the biggest skill is being able to stop your boat, hold your boat head to wind, and then exit. Hard to do. So I put them all on the line on reach, on the whistle, everybody stop your boat, hold your boat, next whistle go. And they're flailing, and then they get better. I get some fault correction, they get better. And now I can see they can kind of do it. Then we go to my favorite game called Cops and Robbers. It's just 2 boats, and they're both on starboard, and one boat's trying to escape and get on port. We can talk about drills next week. But the point is now I'm adding pressure, and I'm adding the other boat. And now we're doing the skill under some pressure. And then I'm putting them in a more confined space. We're going to do the dial-up drill. So now we actually have the whole entry. We're starting to put it together, and they're doing it. And then they're getting comfortable with that. And I'm videoing, and I'm doing my fault correction. And Steve, the most important thing I heard once is a fault undetected is a fault uncorrected. A fault undetected is a fault uncorrected. So I'm really observant. And I don't watch the kids that are doing it well. I watch the kids that aren't doing it well. And I really make sure that they can get it. Because a rising tide floats all boats. And I want to make sure they're confident in their skill. And then I videotape it like you do. And then we come in and we watch the video. You don't have to say much. There it is. Get some more fault correction. Next day we go out. We start to race, put all the pieces together. And Steve, voila. In 2 days, they're match racing.
That's beautiful. So it sounds like you kind of like build on each lesson, builds on it itself until you're actually doing it at the end.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Steve. You're about to coach a season. Is there like a master board in your room that you have all the days of the season and you map out every day what you're going to do every week and all that? Or you kind of wing it? Or what's your method for planning for the season and for planning for the week and planning for a practice?
So I've tried it a few different ways, and it seems the best way is to keep it kind of loose, but I have the same general plan every year is to start with the basics, the boat handling, the tacks, the jibes, sailing flat, and then graduate more into team racing and higher level tactics and things like that. And I think a lot of it is based on how good your team is. Like the first year I coached, they had just won 7 national championships, but everybody graduated and the coach quit. So they say, hey, Steve, he was smart, I guess. They said, hey, Steve, will you coach the team? And, a lot of them could barely sail around the triangle. So there was a few good kids, but a lot of them weren't. So we just spent most of the year just working on the basics. And then, for example, this past year, I had a returning team that had won 3 national championships in a row. And our high school said, hey, no more 8th graders. So I had no new kids. Every single kid had been on the team for at least a year. And
wow.
The first up down drill went so beautifully. I thought, well, screw it. Let's start team racing. We were right into the hard stuff because everybody was really good. Had I had 8th graders that were new to the team, we would have done 2 or 3 months of boat handling. So I think you kind of have to base it on the team. And I think a lot of coaches make a mistake and they move on because they have some agenda where you can't move on until you've everyone's got the skills down. And I often do the same exact practice, like 2 or 3 practices in a row.
Man, I
You
wish
don't want
it
it to
had
get
been-
boring.
Yeah, I wish I'd heard that 20 years ago, Steve. My biggest mistake is it's on my script to move on to the next thing, and off I go, and then I never get my head on the boat and see if they're learning. I agree.
Yeah, I think that's key. And you kind of just let the team decide what you do. And then we also say that, tell the team, practice is like studying, and the regatta is the exam. And so there's no pressure. It's just we go do what we've been practicing at the regatta, and that's the exam. And it kind of tells us what we need to work on. And I tell them, look, if we don't do well, it's my fault.
Yeah.
It means I'm not focusing on what we need to be focusing on. So let's let the exam tell us what we need to focus on, and that kind of guides our next few weeks of practice. So that's nice to keep it loose.
I got a question for you, and we'll do this question, then we can open it up. So you've been coaching high school a long time, and every team, you might have 10 kids, 20 kids, 30 kids, I don't know how many you have, but there's all these differences. There's differences in age, there's differences in gender, differences in physical sizes, differences in maturity, differences in learning issues, differences in interest, all these differences. And they're all on the team. So how do you approach that? You're trying to teach them all, you're trying to build a team, but you have all these differences. So what have you learned in that regard?
Well, with the learning differences, when I write on the whiteboard, who's sailing with who and what we're going to do today, I try to write that in different color ink, just different topics in different color ink for the visual learners. And I talk a bit, I tell stories. And, in U.S. Sailing Level 1, I learned that 60% of people are visual learners. So I love the video. And I've just learned that works. And then I learned that, that's why most people are visual learners. And regarding the differences, I really encourage our team to be great teammates.
Yeah.
And I make them sign a contract at the beginning of the year.
Really?
With like 10 or 11 rules. And one of them is, I will be a teacher. I will be a learner. I will be a great teammate. And there's some other things in there as well, but I think that helps with the differences. And then on day one, I also have everyone say what they love doing that has nothing to do with sailing. And I found that that's really important because you often have this pecking order or hierarchy of who's the best sailor and who's the worst sailor that creates some dynamics within the team that I don't think are perfect. So often the new kid, might have been a pianist or the best cello player in Southern California or whatever. And if they say that, all of a sudden the respect level of everyone goes up, and it makes everyone feel like, oh, okay, we're all people here. And then I really encourage everyone to be great people. And if they're not, I punish them. I think that really helps soothe over the differences.
Ooh, what's a Steve Hunt punishment look like? Is it 20 lashes with a paddle or?
Well, I used to jokingly make people do 10 push-ups, but now that I've taken Safe Sport, I learned that I'm not allowed to do that anymore. So I hope this isn't being recorded. But no,
just between you and I, Steve.
Yeah, we have team bylaws, and they state the rules. And like first is a warning. First issue is a warning, and the next is maybe you miss a practice or you have to miss 2 practices. But it's a little loose, and we make sure it jives with the school's rules. So it's got a progression and due process. But one time I had my best skipper on the team punch his crew in a race. And there was a debate on whether he really did it or not, or whether it was an accidental ooch or whatever. But that was a big deal. And I kicked him off the team for the rest of the year. And in hindsight, that may have been a little bit harsh because it was 3 months till the end of the year and he was the best guy. And that year we actually got 3rd at nationals. And had we had our best guy, maybe we could have won. But ever since then, the team has really been more disciplined, and that story's been shared, and they don't screw around as much because they know I'm not screwing around. And I'm very strict. And especially in the beginning of the year, I've learned that the hard way too. Don't start out buddy, hey, I'm your best friend. Start out strict and then ease into, hey, I might be a cool guy a few months later. You want the first date to be like, oh, is this going to be any fun? But if you start off loose, they run all over you.
Yeah, man.
And I think those are some good tips. And
what about
you always just do the best you can.
You do physical punishment?
I used to do, if you were late, I say if you're not early, you're late. That's a team rule. If you're not early, you're late. And with a big group, you want everyone to try to be early, and inevitably you're on time. And we had this girl that was always late. So I'd make the whole team do wall sits for every minute that anyone was late. And we kept having this one person be late. And so all of a sudden we're doing 20 minutes of wall sits at the beginning of every practice. And while it was cool for our fitness, we weren't sailing as much. And I thought, I wonder if I'm doing the wrong thing here. So I love mentors and coaching, and Adam Warblow, the St. Mary's coach, was my mentor. So I called him and say, hey, Adam, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? And he said, Steve, I used to do that, but you're thinking about it all wrong. He said, what you should do is start practice on time. Don't worry about the person who's late. When the first keen team hits the ramp and launches their boat and goes sailing, go out there with them, be ready, and coach them for 10 minutes before everybody else shows up.
Nice.
So actually reward the people that care and are trying hard, and don't worry about the people that are late. And that actually shifted everything on my team. It made me happier. I wasn't upset about the late people, and the people that actually cared, the kids that cared, got more attention. And so that's what I do now, and it's way better.
Nice. Well, listen, we've come to a good place to pause to ask, let you ask your questions. We've been talking about our philosophies. We've been talking about our methodologies and how we deal with differences. So now it's your time to ask your question, and you can do it many ways. You can just come off mute and say, hey, Dave, this is Jimmy. I got a question, and I'll acknowledge you, and then just stay off mute till we're done. Or you can raise your hand, and then I can call on you, and like that. But Kevin, Ellie, would you ask your question from the chat room? That's a great question. Let me give you the first question, and then somebody else be the next first question to break the ice. But Kevin, go ahead. What was your question to Steve?
Yeah, Steve, just wanted to ask if you could share your team contract. You mentioned a few of them, so maybe whatever easy way to do it, we'd just like to see all your team rules. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, maybe Dave, I can send it to you, and you can add it to the next pre-read. Does that work?
Happy
You guys
to do
all
that.
get it?
That's a great one.
Okay, cool.
All right, the floor is open. You can pick our brains, ask us anything about coaching in high school or coaching in general. Somebody be the first question to break the ice, and then off we go.
Well, I guess I'll do it. Hey, this is Sam Sipe. I coach actually for YSB
Hi,
in
Sam.
Virginia. Dave,
Love your background, Sam.
thank you. It's Hawaii. I had
Nice.
to kind of lighten the mood.
Yeah.
I'm not in Hawaii, but I wanted to first of all, thank you for hosting this. This is great content so far. So thank you for that. But I did want to ask, how do you develop assistant coaches? Or maybe if you have like an associated middle school coach that's kind of coming up with you, how do you develop, a colleague while you're trying to also help develop a program as well in your sailors?
Great. So Sam, stay off mute. Please, Sam, you stay off mute while we're talking. There
Sure.
you go. Steve, why don't you take that one?
Okay, yeah. You try to find the best one that you can, and then I have lunch with them before they actually coach, and we talk about the team philosophies. We talk about the rules of the team, how we should interact as coaches. Like a good married couple, I say, hey, look, let's never contradict each other in front of the kids. If I say something that you think's wrong, don't say, hey, Steve, that's wrong. Let's keep our credibility up, and let's talk about it later. And if I feel like I have a good rhythm going, I say, hey, why don't you kind of, contribute where you think you should, but maybe hang back the first few practices and kind of see how it goes. And we ride in the coach boat together initially, and they watch me run practice and learn how I do it. And then we may graduate into 2 coach boats. I run practice, they help coaching. And then I have them run practice while I maybe sail against the team, and just have them learn from me over time. And then they get more and more involved as it goes. And we often text each other and call each other and talk about various things afterwards. And I ask them to critique me, and I critique them, and Dave and I do the same thing with each other after these calls. Hey, how do you think it went? What could we have said differently? And that's typically what I've done, and it seems to work pretty well.
Nice.
Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, it does. And I actually have a quick follow on, especially because this is something that I've kind of had hiccups with. Do you often use your assistant coach to do some of the more menial stuff, or like attendance, stuff like that? Or do you always try and push that onto team captains or seniors? Or does that cause, divisions on the team, if you will?
I try to be, I try to keep the assistant coach and I doing the same things. And I have the team captains do those chores. And we used to have like the youngest kids on the team do certain things, but I kind of evolved into the team captains handle it. And it's their responsibility. So if they want to assign some, making sure all the boats are perfect to someone else, they can, but it's their ultimate responsibility.
Nice.
Cool.
Jimmy Yurko, your hand's up. What would you like to ask?
There. So I was curious about, Steve, you mentioned getting out sailing with the kids. How common of a practice is that? Last year, I have a really, really small team, like less than 10 kids. And I found that was pretty much my only way of getting group drills, to try to simulate the starting lines and stuff, was for me to hop in a boat. How common, how effective, what kind of, tell me more about how you work that.
Well, if you do hop in and you're the only person, you got to make sure it's safe. So it's a little sketchy, but if you have another person out there with you, it's great. Or if you have a kid on your team that's level 1, level 2 approved, which often you do, you can have them in the coach boat running, blowing whistles and stuff. But I do it all the time. And I typically, why I have an assistant coach is to have either them or me sailing in practice. And I find it makes me a much better coach. Like if you actually do the drill, you learn things that you don't see from the coach boat and vice versa. So I think being a sailor and sailing in practice really gives you insight, and then also it allows you to train new sailors. That's another job of the assistant coach or me is if we get a new sailor that's never sailed before, I say, hey, why don't you go out with him today? Don't participate in practice until maybe the end when we're doing practice starts. Take your time, do roll tacks, roll jives, and develop that person. I also like to identify people on my team that are kind and maybe can crew and skipper to also fill in on that role and develop the new people.
Nice.
Yeah, and also I like to sail against them in the beginning of the year when I can beat them, but towards the end of the year, it's way harder. And so I maybe do it a little bit less, but if you can beat them, they listen to you more. So if you can't beat them, maybe you don't do it as much. If they're kicking your butt, you might lose a little bit of respect.
I took my level 1 years ago with Doc. Oh crap!
Dr. Wood?
Out of William and Mary. He was a coach down there. Okay, off the top of my, I can't remember his last name. Anyway, doesn't matter. Anyway, he advocated against coach getting in the boats for that reason, because unless the wind is really honking, as a full-size adult, it's kind of difficult to be competitive with a bunch of 120-pound kids in a 420 or an FJ.
Right.
So,
but you can say, hey, look, you can win the start and then get past and be like, look, let's talk about starting. And this is what I was doing. And, it also shows us that weight does matter in the boat. I'm not being a weird person about putting various combos together, because we're learning I always give this speech. I say, hey, look, I'm not being biased on weight. I am going to put teams together that I think are a good combo of weight, because we like to do well. And hey, look, if we were sailing stars, all of you would be too small. I'm even too small for a star, but we happen to sail FJs in Southern California where it's light. But if we go to San Francisco and it's windy, we need to sail heavy. So it's just part of the sport. Just like football, the linemen are big and the wide receivers are skinny and fast.
All right. So we have a few more minutes for questions. So who else would like to ask a question to Steve or I? Anything about coaching? Think about your experiences. Randy, go ahead.
Do you guys have extra sailors ride in the coach boat with you? And if so, how do you engage them?
I certainly do that. I hope to have one person in the coach boat at least, because you almost always have someone say, hey, I got a headache, or, oh, I forgot to tell you, coach, I got to go take an exam, or I got a dentist appointment or whatever. So it keeps practice running smoothly if you do have an extra body to throw in a boat. Or I found actually if a skipper is a real jerk, all of a sudden you happen to have many crews that sail with them get a headache all of a sudden. That's a good learning experience too. But you can learn more from the coach boat if you're often in an FJ or 420 than you can in a practice. So I actually try to have almost everybody ride with me from time to time. And I just coach and talk and ask them questions.
Yeah. I'll just jump in quickly. Whenever I do match racing clinic, I always try to have one more team's worth of kids in boats whenever possible. It's so powerful to have them ride with you. Plus, they get a break. But they, you know, in skiing, people learn to ski well because on the way up, they're watching the skiers. In sailing, you never get time to watch other good sailing or watch other people do it. So I think it's very powerful. Josh, your hand's up. What do you got?
Yeah, I guess not so much a question as when you're talking about like the inner game of tennis, all that sort of stuff. That's actually a book I've enjoyed reading. But one of the things that my team's been kind of talking through as we go through not sailing for the spring, we call it the Sailors Crete or the Essential Competitor. So we've just kind of had like this list of kind of the in your head things and the actually, can I share your screen real quick? No. But it's
just if you have a question, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry. I guess that was probably not the thing to jump in and speak about. Sorry, wasting time.
Not a problem. Put something in the chat room if you want, and happy to have it. So, well, listen, we are kind of getting to the end of the road here. You know, the hour goes by way too quickly. And Steve, I got to tell you, it's been really fun to hang out with you. I've learned so much. It's so much fun to hear you doing things that I've been doing, and you're doing things that I hadn't thought about. So really fun. And I can see why your teams are so successful and why people really respect you as a coach. So here in our last little bit, any last parting words of advice or wisdom you give to the new coach, the sailing coach who may have been that chemistry teacher who didn't show up at the faculty meeting and then got assigned the sailing team, or they want to be the coach but they don't have much experience and they're looking for some tidbits to help them along. So what is some Steve Hunt advice for the newer, less experienced coaches?
I think one big thing that sticks out is to tell the truth for all of us, regardless of experience. And if you're not that great at sailing, don't pretend that you are, because kids have like the best BS meters. So be very honest and truthful. Say, hey, look, I don't know how to sail that well, but I'm going to help you as best as I can. And also, if you do know what you're doing, never lie. Or I would tell the truth. I would find a coaching mentor, ideally in your district, someone that you can call and talk to. And I have that as well. It's really helpful. And then, like we said, teach with video. Find the great roll tack online and show them that roll tack, then go practice it. And then when you come in, show them video of themselves and compare it to that roll tack and let them participate in the debrief. Call on the best kids on your team to speak in the debrief. And I think there's a lot of great resources out there too. My yacht club made me take level 1 a couple months ago, and I wasn't sure about it. I'd taken it 20 years ago, but I thought, I know what I'm doing. But I took level 1 and I learned a ton. And so I think the U.S. Sailing host of classes, level 1, 2, and 3 would be a great way to go as well. I think they have other resources also with drills and various things that could help you out. Yeah,
well, I'll tell you what, it's a great, thanks for mentioning it. I got a great letter from Stu Gilflin, who's the education director for U.S. Sailing, and he knew we'd be with you all tonight, and he wanted me to share some thoughts with you guys that'll help you guys become better coaches and help U.S. Sailing do a better job helping you all. So this is from Stu. He says, if you're looking for coaching resources or training, check out U.S. Sailing's new Coaching Essentials page. You can see it on the screen, and there's the website. It's also in your pre-read. The page is loaded with free videos, articles, and online courses to help you improve your coaching. He said, you'll also find information about what U.S. Sailing is doing to support coaches like yourselves. And as a member of U.S. Sailing, you'll have access to a variety of tools to help you run better practices, be a smarter, safer coach. You get discounts to the North U webinars, which are great. Curated content from Dave Dellenbaugh's Speed and Smarts, which is the best information out there. Free access to Safe Sport online training, which normally costs $20. 30% off a membership to SailFlow. We always want to know what the wind's going to do. He said you'll also be eligible to take U.S. Sailing instructor training courses, which of course are the gold standard in on-water sailing education. Stu's put together a special discounted membership rate for high school sailing coaches. You just have to go to sign in for the membership and put in your promo code May ISSA, and it's a $65 value for just under $50. So he encourages you to do that. And if you have a family membership or an individual membership, multi-year, it's an even better deal. And he's reminding us all that by becoming members of U.S. Sailing, we're supporting U.S. Sailing's efforts to build a community of active, engaged sailors, and they can't do the work without our help. So I encourage you all to do that. He also wanted me to point out that in this bizarre time when the AP flag is up, U.S. Sailing has pivoted and they've created something called the Starboard Portal, which of course many of you know about. But it's a great program. They have daily programming. It's often live programming. It's very relevant for coaches and sailors. There's going to be an interview with some Sail GP athletes coming up. Rolex Yachtsman of the Year Award winners are going to be talking about that. And there might even be a 25th anniversary Mighty Mary reunion coming up. So you can check that out. You can have your sailors check it out. And finally, he asked, he'd love to get to know more about you guys. The more he knows about coaching and what your experiences are, the more they can customize their programs to help. So he's asking you to take a short survey. There's the link on the screen, and the link's also in your pre-read. And just fill it out. You'll go into a raffle. You can get some U.S. Sailing swag. You can win a copy of Sailing Drills Made Easy, which is a great book filled with all kinds of stuff. It'll also give Stuart some information to help you all do your job. So please support the U.S. Sailing programs and what they do, and take advantage of it, because you all want to be better coaches and whatnot. So listen, to tie it up, would you all come back to gallery view? Would you come off mute? Steve, I've had a great time, man. I've learned a lot from you, and thanks.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from you too, Dave. I love the way your brain works and how organized it is and all the techniques. And I think I'm certainly going to be asking my kids more questions than I have in the past, like you do. That's a brilliant idea. And maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. What are you doing next week? Same day, same time.
Sounds good.
Same Zoom link. So we'll make it a date. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's been fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I hope it's reinforced some things you're already doing, maybe trigger some thoughts. Maybe you walk away with 2 or 3 things that you haven't been doing yet. And it's all about getting better as a coach. And so we wish you well on that. Next week, Steve and I are going to talk about the role of drills in practice. What are our drills that are most effective? Steve's going to share a couple of his secret drills that he hasn't shared before for both team racing and fleet racing. So that's next week's session. But for now, we're done. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, from all of ISSA, Dave and Steve and Tim, thanks for making this happen. Good stuff.